So this is something that I wanted to talk about because I feel like oftentimes when victims come forward trying to get help or explain their stories, it is really hard to contextualize this, especially when you haven't been through something like this for yourself. So this is something that I hope to explain today in great detail and to bring more awareness about what's currently going on behind the terrorist watch list. Now, the FBI's KST file functions primarily as a means of identifying and tracking the whereabouts of its subjects. Now, under the McCarthy guidelines in 2008, it allowed them to employ the efforts of various intrusive surveillance tactics, that including getting their agents and informants to follow individuals around day in and day out for an unlimited amount of time. Now, to how they're exercising their authorities under this initiative is unknown. But what we do know, and what did come out, was Cynthia McKinney back in 2006 calling for an oversight hearing into the FBI to investigate the type of surveillance tactics and programs that they wanted to employ for the war on terrorism. But even after her requests to seek an investigation within the FBI, no investigation was done. So still to this day, we don't know the type of surveillance tactics or programs that the FBI is eliciting for the war on terrorism. Now, the FBI's KST file composes of three subcategories, one of them being a full investigation, a preliminary investigation, and a subset for non-investigative subjects, to which they claim is only for tracking and surveilling purposes only, but the accounts of which they're tracking and surveilling these citizens is not on any record of the terrorist database. And to give you guys a little bit of context on this, these are individuals that they're not investigating, but they have on the terrorist watch list, and they claim to only be tracking and surveilling. But the accounts of which they're tracking and surveilling these citizens is not on any record of the terrorist watch list. And it's believed that under the subset of the terrorist watch list is where this trafficking and experimentation is taking place. And what you'll famously hear from this, and I'm pretty sure you guys have heard, is individuals complaining about getting tracked and monitored by individuals that they don't know, along with experimental defense technologies being used on them. And a lawyer that's currently working on this case has tried to file several FOA lawsuits against the FBI, but the FBI continues to deny every single one of her requests, refusing to release any information into the subset, even the ones on deceased individuals, which in the case of non-investigative subjects is illegal. So the question comes in, if there's nothing to hide, why do you keep refusing the release of any information into this subset? A few of the parties that the FBI works in direct connection with for this database is the CIA, state and local law enforcement, fusion centers, along with the Pentagon. If you guys didn't know, back in 2001, was given the ability to waive an individual's rights to informed consent for non-consensual human experimentations. Now, the directive for this research project focused not only on bioelectric technology, but also on non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation for the purposes of behavioral control, along with the advancements in defense technologies. And these were the later factions of the MKUltra project that the Pentagon took interest to, shortly after the revelations that the Soviet Union had advancements with this technology.
For the past 40 years, the world has been riveted by the threat of nuclear war, and more recently by the prospect of space defenses using lasers and other modern technologies. But while both sides at the Geneva summit will be focusing on these matters, progress is being made in even newer weapons that could render any arms agreement relatively useless. Lightning is the most dramatic form of energy to be found in nature. Scientists have succeeded in creating limited types of artificial lightning, and some think that these could be the forerunners of a new type of directed energy weapon, part of a family of weapons which operate within the radio frequency segment of the electromagnetic spectrum, and are thus referred to as radio frequency weapons. Dr. James Frazier has researched electromagnetic effects for the Air Force for over 10 years, and he, like a small but growing number of weapons experts, feels that radio frequency, or RF weapons, could be the wild card in the ongoing arms race.
You could have tremendous amounts of radiative power, and what you did with that power then is a matter of engineering design and what your goal is.
Robert Bass, a physicist and PhD in mathematics, is working on U.S. weapons research. He says that the Soviets seem to be ahead in a number of areas, and especially in RF weapons.
We are behind the Soviet Union in directed energy weapons based on 60 gigahertz microwave beams.
Dr. Bass and others feel the most likely form of Soviet RF weaponry would be high-powered microwaves, similar to a focused, ultra-high-intensity radar beam. It would literally cook humans and knock out computers and electronic surveillance and communications gear. Machines known as gyrotrons can produce the massive pulses needed to drive these devices, and it's believed that the Soviet Union has a 3 to 5 year lead in this technology. Over the past year, CNN has repeatedly asked the Department of Defense and the Air Force about radio frequency weapons. After much resistance, DoD finally said that the subject was too sensitive to discuss. In my next report, I was the subject of a prototype device designed to project images into the mind without electrodes. The prototype machine, developed from Soviet scientific data, could, according to some scientists, have a profound effect as a weapon of war. Electronic mind control research is not new. A scientific milestone in this area came in the 1960s, when Dr. Jose Delgado demonstrated remote control over a charging bull. By connecting a radio antenna to electrodes inserted into the bull's brain, Delgado proved that the animal's aggressive impulses could be thwarted by electronically manipulating the bull's muscle reflexes.
Do you realize the fantastic possibilities if from the outside we could modify the inside? Could we give messages to the inside? But the beauty is that now we are not using electrodes.
This scientist, who did not want his identity revealed, is employed by the U.S. government and has done secret RF weapons research. He believes that tests done with the LIDA and similar machines prove that humans are susceptible to remote alterations of mood and awareness.
Certain kinds of weak electromagnetic signals work exactly like drugs. And so the promise is that anything you can do with drugs, you could do with the right electromagnetic signals. Apparently, there are specific sites involved, specific functions involved. It's a matter of matching up, just like it is with a pill or a drug, to cause and effect. You could have a cause and effect relationship between a magnetic field and a biological function.
CNN enlisted the help of noted physicist Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher and electrical engineer Bill Van Weiss to build and test an RF mine interference machine from data found in Soviet scientific literature. The machine itself was inexpensive and easy to construct, using parts from a consumer electronics store. It emits a weak magnetic field, pulsed at extremely low frequency. As the subject of the test, I was blindfolded, and my ears were blocked to prevent inadvertent clues as to what was happening. A magnetic probe was placed about 18 inches from my head. As the experiment began, 2 signal generators produced waveform patterns that were transmitted by the magnetic probe at about 1/1000th of the Earth's natural magnetic field strength.
Describe anything that you see, if any.
In the control room, Van Weiss varied the waveforms being generated. In another room, I could see waveforms changing shape in my mind.
Parabola just went by?
Parabola just went by.
Oh, yeah, I did. I just flipped the switch. Parabola?
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, let's see. Check this out.
Later, I asked Van Weiss what a weapon using this technology could do.
Induce basically what would be considered hallucinations in people, direct them to do things against their so-called better judgment.
How easy would it be to assemble a weapon from existing off-the-shelf parts?
In 3 weeks, I could put together a weapon that would take care of a whole town.
This sound, which is received by shortwave radios in the United States, is generated by another Soviet radio frequency device. It is known as the woodpecker because of its tapping noise. It is broadcast by a number of high-powered radio transmitters operating deep in the Soviet Union since July 4th, 1976. Though the official Defense Department explanation of the woodpecker is that it is an over-the-horizon radar designed to track U.S. missile launches, some scientists suspect that the woodpecker is designed to interfere with human brain function.
As far as I'm concerned, the potential that this has for producing a direct psychoactive effect upon the total American population is there, has never been disproven.
Dr. Robert Becker is a pioneer in the field of bioeffects of electromagnetism.
The signal range within which the woodpecker operates is that which has been reported by many investigators to produce a tranquilizing effect upon animals.
We are just incredibly sensitive to these magnetic stimuli.
Dr. Bob Beck, a PhD in nuclear engineering, has done extensive research into electromagnetic effects on humans.
The signal was permeating power grids in the United States. It was being picked up by power lines, re-radiated. It was coming into the homes on the light circuits.
I was surprised after coming here that the influence of electromagnetic fields was almost completely ignored here.
Dr. Larissa Valenskaya was heavily involved in Soviet electromagnetic research before being allowed to emigrate to the United States. She told CNN about Soviet research in electromagnetic effects.
Any field not only carries energy, but also carries information.
She stated that the research was carried out on orders from the Soviet government.
Of course, the military were extremely interested in this potential of remote influence.
Is the United States military working in the field of electronic mind control? Officially, the Department of Defense will not comment because the subject area is, quote, too sensitive.
Now, the last party that signed off on this directive was Congress, and they gave the Pentagon the ability to only run these human experimentations on prisoners of war. But after this directive got enacted, we saw an influx of not only those individuals getting experimented on, but also citizens in the United States.
My name is Lisa Becker. I am also from Wisconsin. I have been a non-consenting test subject in military medical research. I, too, believe my experience is referred to as no-touch torture, utilizing defense technologies. I'm asking you to help initiate a congressional investigation. We've all come a long way. This is what is needed. We want to have the accounts of this extreme human rights abuse that's going on in our country documented and heard, all of the accounts. We also need what was done during the Clinton administration, which is a major declassification of some of these documents that are hiding what's been going on. I speak for many when I say we've suffered long enough. My personal experience has been 10 years. I've been vilified. I've been ostracized. I've been tortured. I have burns on my body. I'm an American. I have rights. The answer to the question, the big question today, could it happen today? The answer is yes, it is happening today. It is happening for some of us every day. I am begging for you to help us. Thank you.
This commission has spoken of a long history of abuse of the human research subject. Although no one mentioned MKUltra today, President Clinton recently apologized for this. My young child and I have been used as non-consensual test subjects. We have been subjected to COINTELPRO-like stalking, remote neural monitoring, and electromagnetic torture, resulting in psychological and physical damage.
And the type of technologies that came out of this research initiative were devices like the RNM device, which is a device that can not only alter someone's brain waves at a distance, but can pick up on someone's thoughts along with their mental states. And the other device that came out of this was the radio frequency hearing device in 2002. And this device has the capabilities of transmitting voices or intelligible speech into someone's head at a distance. So it almost has the capabilities of recreating something like an artificial schizophrenia. And this was the same device that the military used against enemy combatants during the Iraq War.
In ordinary sound perception, sound that goes into the ear canal gets amplified by the small bones in the middle ear and then gets to the inner ear where the cochlea resides, and in the cochlea is converted to electrical impulse. But in the case of a microwave auditory effect, is the source is electromagnetic. So if you expose the biological tissue to a pulse of microwave energy, the tissue expands and induces a vibration. Instead of going through the middle ear, the microwave-induced vibration gets propagated to the inner ear directly.
And the other device that came out of this was directed energy weapons in 1982. And I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with the likes of that due to everything that happened in Havana, Cuba. But this device has the ability to not only cause someone vestibular problems and irreversible cognitive issues, but can also heat up someone's skin, cause third-degree burns, and with overtime extended use, causing things like induced heart attacks, strokes, and even cancer.
My name is Dr. John Hall. I'm a medical doctor from Texas. As I understand the memorandum from the President, it's for you to determine if current legislation is adequate in protecting individuals and if there's any ongoing experimentation. In reviewing the common rule, it's very obvious that there's a lot of loopholes to informed consent. All of the horrific experiments you've mentioned, Willowbrook, MKUltra, radiation experiments, mostly were done without informed consent. They were funded by the DoD and intelligence agencies, where I'm not even so sure you would know if there's an IRB, much less if an IRB is looking at informed consent. As a physician, relative to some of what you're hearing today, in the community, we are seeing an alarming rate of complaints of use of electromagnetic weapons. Microwave auditory effects, silent sound spectrum, EEG cloning, which has taken the lab out of the laboratory and into the home. Most of these, from the research that we reviewed, can be done remotely. It seems to be more weapons research than medical research. I've personally corresponded with upwards of 1,500 victims, all complaining of identical complaints from every state in the nation of being exposed to electromagnetic radiation, non-ionizing radiation for the use of cognitive control or behavior control. I've submitted a paper to you, and there's another paper submitted to each member from another physician in Kansas City, alluding to the same thing.
I've been a human subject for experimentation for almost 2 years, and I've contacted Dr. Hall. I stand with a very large group. Excuse me, I'm very nervous, but I'm very tired of having my rights taken away.
Allowing this to continue is allowing our rights and freedoms to be taken away from all of us, one right at a time. It's interesting how much technology exists that would find the criminals and the perpetrators of this heinous crimes of electronic harassment and terroristic tactics being used against innocent U.S. citizens on a daily basis. These technologies should be used for the betterment of our society. But you know what the most powerful weapon is in our arsenal that would put an end to these horrific crimes once and for all. It is someone giving a damn and correcting the things that are taking place. We have all gone to people who took an oath to protect and serve, who have been in commissions to investigate the unethical treatment of citizens in human experimentations. We have been denied protection and service and have been ignored by commission after commission. Enough is enough. This is America. We're supposed to be better than this. We all know what Hitler did to the Jewish people. When this all comes out, what the American government has done to their own people, it will make Hitler look like a saint.
And I will be linking down the full committee hearing so you guys can check that out. But I just wanted to point out a few other devices that came out of this research initiative, which were nerve system manipulation devices. And these devices, when it's aimed at a human subject, can cause things like involuntary limb movements, muscle spasms, disorientation of the mind, vestibular manipulation, sexual stimulation, pinpointed pains to the body, headaches, and also the ability to create the sensation of a heating or cooling effect to the skin. And the thing with these devices is that it can be beamed at a human subject up to 7 football fields away. And what's going on now is extremely dangerous and it needs to stop. These are war crimes happening right beneath our noses. And the FBI targets these individuals not for the purposes of terrorism, but for the purposes of experimentation. All of the accounts of the atrocities that the FBI, in coalition with the other intelligence agencies, has been eliciting against these citizens has been done off the record from the terrorist database. And the lawyer that's currently working on this case has been trying to retrieve the records into the subset, but the FBI continues to deny every single one of her requests.
So when I first started experiencing the harassment in 2014, I read that this technology that they've developed allows them to communicate with the victims or with the people that are being targeted by allowing them to read brain patterns. I didn't believe it until I actually experienced it, and that was in 2019.
It's a combination of very atrocious programs that the United States has had, unfortunately, such as MK Ultra, and which was from the CIA, experimentation with the minds of people, the brains, and COINTELPRO. They are victims of organized stalking, psychological operations, and physical attacks through directed energy weapons. Many of them knowingly are placing innocent civilians, and they're treating them as domestic terrorists, even though they know that they don't meet the standard. It is not plausible to have so many people tell the same story and for them to be in the TSDB. It's just mathematically impossible. So we're asking the court to order defendants to produce the TSDB status of these people, of these plaintiffs, and defendants have refused so far. So that's another matter that the court has to adjudicate on, and it's part of the fact finding. All of it comes from documents that are what we call in the legal field uncontroverted facts. Many of them, most of them produced, for example, let me give you just one pearl of an example, which is Inspector General from the Department of Justice report 2008-16 says that talking about the irregularities on the terrorist screening center, that FBI field offices nominate people to the terrorist screening database without complying with any FBI regulations. Let that sink in. It's the weaponization of the government, as no one is talking about it. Because in Congress, you've been hearing about people being pressured to classify people as domestic terrorists, but they don't know the real consequences of it. And that is what our lawsuit is about. And that's why every American should be aware of it and should read it and should, just demand that this project is defunded. It's one of those black projects that it be defunded by Congress. Because if Congress pulls the plug on the money, it'll stop.
Yeah, but so their logic in terms of why they're doing this is experimentation purposes. Is that the logic of this program?
Yes. Well, I have learned a lot. I only arrived to targeted justice in September, but it has been like an intensive 10-hour seminar for me, and I am very grateful for that. The goal of the program is to get you to kill yourself. It's very cruel, and they just do really atrocious things to you to force you into being destitute and into trying to kill yourself. For example, the polls we have internal, the polls that Targeted Justice has carried out reflect that 14% of targeted individuals are homeless, whereas the national average is 0.5%. So Mr. Lighthouse explains to me that, being a targeted individual, it's some sort of life insurance in the horrible sense that they are not allowed to murder you because you're supposed to kill yourself. They want to know how to, they want to have an absolute control of minds and know what it takes to, for example, somebody like me, to dominate somebody like me. And, I'm sure they regret having targeted me. It is my hope they regret it. But so, let me give you an example of something really atrocious that they do. There is this lady in Ohio. Her daughter has Down syndrome. She's a 34-year-old woman with Down syndrome. And even though the mother, who is the originally targeted one, she's in her 70s, doesn't have voice to skull, they torment and torture her 34-year-old daughter every night. And she can't comprehend, she can't understand what's going on. She just hears the voices and fights with these voices until sheer exhaustion. She sleeps until she falls asleep. And the mother in the room next door is hearing her daughter fight with these voices from nowhere. And so the mother cries herself to sleep. I mean, one mother can tolerate this atrocious suffering on your daughter. I immediately looked up, and there is no correlation between schizophrenia and Down syndrome patients. So it's just so obvious that the level of cruelty that these people are capable of carrying out is beyond what I had ever imagined any human to be capable of. So that's the goal. The goal is to discover how to control the uncontrollable people, and what works and what doesn't, and the end goal is to make you kill yourself. Along those lines, I wanted to say there is a very interesting case you should look into because it's ongoing right now. And it's Missouri and Louisiana versus, I don't know if it's Biden or entities of the federal government that publicly said that our mines are part of the United States infrastructure. And as such, they have a right to police them and to control them. And that case is currently going on. It was filed in Louisiana. It's Missouri and Louisiana versus, again, I don't know if it's Biden or, but it's in our Substack newsletter. They said, that our minds, our brains are part of the American infrastructure. And that is just so dangerous and in such in violation of the Fourth Amendment and the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizure, which is also part of what we're alleging in our complaint, because this targeting includes all of that. So I really urge you to look into that, because that is the frontier of not having any freedom.
My real specialty is artificial intelligence and robotics, and redefining what human beings will be in the future. And a lot of people find this scary. I don't want to be redefined. I don't like this idea, something that's beyond my control. The very sense of self is going to be altered. Well, you're actually under a lot of control systems, and you have been since birth. So I was talking a little bit about, mind control in particular. And something that I worked on, that I'm not proud of, but it's called the voice of God weapon. So there are 4 different techniques and technologies that can pipe voices into an individual's head. And once you can do that, you can control them using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. You're rewiring their thought processes and brains. And so this gets into what's called offensive information warfare. And they used it, I believe, in the Gulf War to tell the enemy at that time, lay down your guns, this is Allah. And it worked pretty well, because hearing voices which have no direction or sound, you have to assume that it's some spiritual entity. So it works pretty well. And then there's something called hyper game theory. How do you, they want to see if they can manipulate people to do things that are irrational, but also walk them to their death. And so you can call it a eugenics program even. And they need to sample all cultures, language throughout the world to define their probability matrices of which tricks, techniques, deception works. That's just what's happening.
Yeah, can you elaborate on hyper game theory and so-called walking people to their death?
Okay. Yeah, so hypergame theory came out of a professor at Dartmouth, obviously funded by the Air Force and DARPA, and etc. all the acronyms. And it came from a man that died recently, a brilliant man named John Nash, who, there was a movie made about him called The Beautiful Mind, and he was a mathematician who won a Nobel Prize. And he created game theory, which is used in economics as well as war theory. Now, it relies on rational players. So you run these simulations. What will China do if we make this move? What is the game, the war game going on? Or you can use it in business, similar process. Hypergame theory is one level above of that abstraction, that you don't know what game they're going to play. So they use it in cyber warfare, mostly. And attackers, hackers, they'll use several different techniques. But the defenses, the administrator, and the virus protection, they don't know what game these hackers are using. So they create a probability matrix over the period of the time of sampling all the different kinds of hacks they get. Now you can apply this to other aspects of life. The way that I was using it is they're trying to, it was called mind hacking. So they're trying to hack a targeted individual, and the targeted individual will create mental defenses as best as they can. They'll go to their social networks. Well, what do? They try to disrupt the social network, so you have no family or friends. It's a back and forth game that they're trying to find out the maximum probability of death, in the example that you use, where you'll commit suicide or you'll harm somebody, become a Manchurian candidate, or something like that. So it's huge database of probabilities across all the variations of mind. The human genome, I think we have, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not even going to say it, but a finite in the hundreds of thousands of different genes across our species. And we mapped them out in the Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
And this is the same program that the former head of FBI, Ted Gunderson, tried to expose before his passing in 2011. And even after he made reports to the courts with sworn affidavits, along with public statements like this, Congress never did an investigation within the FBI.
I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know if anybody's going to do anything about it. Hopefully they will. Based on 28 years' experience and research, I have determined there are thousands of victims who have been targeted by an illegal U.S. government rogue criminal enterprise that is active 24 hours a day throughout the United States. A network of victims who work with me have reached the same conclusion based on, 1, their personal experience. These are the people who have come to me. 2, the significant number of victims, thousands of them. And 3, the extent and intensity of the harassment. I'm talking about micro beams, I'm talking about surveillances, I'm talking about poison gas, everything, the evil that you can think of. I believe this well-organized, sophisticated operation has a central command located somewhere in the United States with multiple satellite offices scattered throughout the country. This criminal enterprise by this rogue element targets an individual. It is necessary to, in order to target them, they 1, identify the individual, 2, outline the reason the victim is targeted, and 3, document and identify the weapons and tactics being directed against him or her. So I will do that in this lecture that I'm giving right here today.
And I, for the last 2 years, have tried to make several reports with multiple government departments, attending several city council meetings, and in the most recent one, I was told by the mayor of Houston to stay safe. So at this point, I really don't know what else to do anymore, but I think it's going to require the help of the American public to really initiate or move Congress into doing an investigation within the FBI, and specifically what they're doing to citizens under the subset of the terrorist watch list.